Should your tax dollars be going to factory farming? Yeah, let's talk about that.
Instead of focusing on winning arguments, we're teaching the basic fundamentals of sales and marketing and how we can use them to win in the world of politics, teaching you how to meet people where they're at on the issues they care about. Welcome to The Brian Nichols Show.
Well, hey there, folks. Brian Nichols here on another fun-filled episode of The Brian Nichols Show. I am, as always, yes, your humble host, joining you from our lovely Cardio Miracle Studios here in sunny Eastern Indiana. The Brian Nichols Show is powered by the best heart health supplement in the world, Cardio Miracle. So if you want to learn how to lower your resting heart rate, lower that blood pressure while improving your pump at the gym, stick around. We'll talk about that later in today's episode. But first, let's dig into the topic of conversation. We've been seeing our tax dollars when we had Elon Musk and Doge start to dig back, or rather dig into the different bureaucracies there in the federal government. We started to figure out that our dollars and cents are going all over the place. And one of the big questions that's been raised over the past few years is not just, where our dollars are going, but is it good where our dollars are going? One of the areas we've seen is the work that good folks over organizations like White Coast Waste. They've been pulling out all the different pieces of evidence showing how our different government organizations like the NIH under Anthony Fauci were using beagles as testing subjects, literally snipping their vocal cords so they wouldn't be able to yelp. What? Insane. But that's not the only place where our tax dollars are going. It's also going to areas like factory farming. Is that a good thing? I would dare say a lot of us out there say probably not, even though there is, I think we all agree there's value behind having these larger farms out there. So, we need to dig into this, and I can't do that myself. So joining me today from the Wilberforce Institute is Liam Gray. Liam, welcome to the Brian Nichols Show. How you doing?
Hey, doing great, Brian. Thank you for having me.
Great to have you on the show, man. I know we're just for audience elephant in the room. We are having a little bit of a delay, so don't worry. We're still going to be doing a great conversation today. If I need to cut out some stuff in the back end, I will. But no worries, Liam. I'm really looking forward to today's conversation. I know I had Isaac Wilhauer on the show previously. We were talking about some other stuff on that episode, so I'll make sure I include that link in the show notes. But do us a favor, introduce yourself here to the audience, and then talk to us about the Wilberforce Institute. What are the stuff you guys do over there?
Yeah, sure. So I worked in Republican communications and worked in PR for a number of years. Before that, I was in the Army and the civilian intelligence world for a bit. But now I'm running the Wilberforce Institute. We launched in September of last year. We're really focused on the ways in which animals are being harmed by government, and the ways in which government is causing animal cruelty. We're probably especially focused on factory farming, which I think is an industry that's really bolstered by our tax dollars and by government bureaucrats, that kind of a lot of cronyism. But we're really anywhere where you see government impact hurting animals is really where we end up talking about issues.
So I teased factory farming, right? I also talked about when we had our good buddy Justin Goodman there from the White Coast Waste Project on the show, and we were talking about the different the different I guess like studies. I don't know how to frame it, like studies, tests on these poor beagles and other animals in order to test the efficacy of drugs or what have you. And it's pretty barbaric stuff, man. But that's not just the only area, right, where we see a lot of these animal tests taking place, or just animal abuse. We mentioned earlier in the intro, factory farming is a big issue as well. And a lot of folks probably aren't aware that their tax dollars are going towards supporting these types of institutions. So just kind of lay the groundwork here for us, Liam. Like, what is factory farming? Why is it not necessarily a great thing? I guess, and then what's the argument to say it's a necessary evil? But let's then dig into the dollars and cents side of things, right? Like where our taxpayer dollars are actually going to enable and promote this type of farming.
Yeah, absolutely. So factory farming, I think it's arguable that it's not even really farming. This is where you're talking about big industrial meat producers that have a concentrate, big factories where they're producing tons and tons of meat. Now, I understand this. The origins of it, it's not necessarily something nefarious. I think it's, you have an expanding population and they're trying to find more and more efficient ways of feeding them. So in doing this, there's industry has grown, and as the government has kind of gotten more and more involved in and entrenched in growing it, kind of as these things tend to happen, you've seen a complete degradation of how the animals are treated within these facilities. There's, I mean, I think people have probably always seen, seen a lot of the kind of horrific videos and the mistreatment of animals that come in these facilities. But then also, there's very little. This kind of gets into a lot of the sort of MAHA and RFK type stuff. There's very little into cases, what chemicals are being put into there, what antibiotics, what hormones these animals are giving, and what that's doing to us. When you look at how our tax dollars are supporting this, one of those ways is research. If you look at the USDA has the Agriculture Research Services, which is an agency. We actually, you mentioned Doge earlier. We talked about, right around the time Trump got elected, we put out an article in Town Hall talking about whole departments that you could cut that would both cut government and save animals, and one of them was the ARS under USDA, which is really, it's just it's us doing the research for the industrial meat producers, and I think when people think of a government research department, they're probably assuming that this is going to maybe the quality of the food and what's healthy, or less likely but more hopeful, maybe this is you think it's maybe research on the care of the animals, to how you can produce this meat efficiently without undue harm to the animals. But none of that is the focus. The focus is entirely how the animals bigger, how can they and so it's all parts that help those industries, but it doesn't do anything for the consumer. And so if these want to do that research on their own, well, that's one thing. That's of course, of course they wanted to figure out how to produce the stuff most efficiently. But why are we paying for it? Why is that a department, in our government that is bolstered by, that's funded by our tax dollars? Why wouldn't they, like any other industry, have to conduct their own research? We also look at things like the big beautiful bill. I think it was Rand Paul that said he could potentially support it. He's good with the cuts, but there's it adds so much spending that he was uncomfortable with where it was. And so another one of the articles that we put talking about, well, one of the places we could do this, if you look into the thousands of pages of that bill, there's tons and tons of just carve outs for factory farming and for industrial meat producers, just figuring identity things. There's money for projected unborn calf losses that you couldn't ever quantify, but they're getting millions of dollars for that. So it's just any way we can subsidize that industry, we're doing it.
An unborn calf gets subsidized. Wow! Don't tell Planned Parenthood. That's a different conversation for a different day. Liam, right. I know what you're talking about though, right? But I know what you're talking about when you see those trucks on the interstate. My poor wife. We just got back from a trip visiting the in-laws down in South Carolina, and we're driving back, and you had a 10-hour drive, and you see all these big trucks, and you see all the the little pigs and the cows and that kind of stuff on them, and it breaks my wife's heart, right, when you see it. Because it just feels right? It just feels icky when you see this just herd of, literally it feels like a herd of animals crammed into these back of these 18-wheelers. They're driven sometimes, hundreds of miles to these processing plants. And then it literally just turns into, the piggy's last day, the cow's last day, where they all just march into the factory, and then they march themselves right over to my meat counter over at Kroger. But then this turns into the objection that I hear from folks, right? Well, Brian, you mentioned that you don't want to have, this call it negative treatment of animals, or the negative things put into these animals. But think about the alternative. If we didn't have this as an option, hundreds of thousands, millions of people even might go hungry, right? Like I'm a big guy in the fitness industry. I like to lift weights and eat the different meats. I like my chicken. I like my steak. And I could easily hear folks in that world say, well, all of a sudden, even if it's not the best quality and there are question marks, at least it's better than the alternative. And to your point, there is a big push from more of the MAHA side of the aisle, which I am more and more becoming, much more comfortable with, because I do see, to your point, this stuff that we're filling our meats with, when they are alive, with the antibiotics, with the different research of the chemicals and such, like there's a lot of big question marks. And we're seeing this now, right, with the different autoimmune diseases that folks are dealing with. I know my dad's been dealing with an issue with gluten or celiac disease for 15, 20 years at this point. And, he grew up as a farmer, right? So like what things were he putting into his cattle that he had no idea would have these long-term negative impacts on human biology, just by the nature of using it and being around it? Like, extrapolate that forward, we're going to see a lot of folks who are probably in the same church, different pew, but it's because they're ingesting it with no idea what's going on. So I laid a lot out there. Liam, what's your feedback?
Life building something meaningful, a career, a family, a legacy. But none of that matters if your health can't keep up. And the truth is, as we age, our body's natural production of nitric oxide, which is vital for circulation and heart function, declines sharply. And that drop increases your risk for high blood pressure, poor oxygen flow, and even cognitive decline. You don't feel like yourself, and no doctor seems to have an answer that doesn't involve more prescription medication. And that's why I recommend Cardio Miracle, because it's an all-in-one blend of nitric oxide boosters like L-arginine, L-citrulline, organic beets, and more that support your cardiovascular system, brain function, and your immune response. It's not about reversing time. It's about giving your body what it needs to keep showing up strong. You've worked too hard to feel like you're fading. So scan that little QR code over my shoulder, click the link in the show notes, or go to cardiomiracle.com/TBNS and get back in control of your health. And look for the little note saying you're shopping with Brian Nichols on the Cardio Miracle homepage. One more time, that's cardiomiracle.com/TBNS. And now, let's get back to the show.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I think, I'm sympathetic to a lot of that. I think it makes a lot of sense. We need to be able to feed people, right? And we need to be able to have, affordable food. But I think there's also just a surface level, what we're eating needs causing us long-term harm. There's problems. A lot of something that I think people would be surprised to know is, if you take, for instance, Smithfield, that's a one of the biggest meat producers. That's a Chinese-owned company. So effectively, like anything else in China, it's a Chinese Communist Party, and I don't personally feel comfortable eating something that I don't feel comfortable with the idea of China deciding what is going into my food and me not having any recourse or any way of knowing about knowing what that entails. And I don't think we should be saying to people who are worried about the prices of food that their only option is to eat this, to eat something that's going to cause them that kind of harm. So I think there's other solutions there. I think you hit on something, though, if I could go back to it, that kind of, you mentioned, I think you said the word intuition, but you mentioned that your wife, and just kind of how you guys have those gut reactions. I think that's a lot of why we're doing this. Is there's this sort of perception of conservatives and libertarians, like we're all these heartless people, and I think that there's an idea. A lot of us just have the moral intuition. We care about animals. We know that there's something, like you said, we know there's something wrong with the way this is being done. But when you try to look at the answers to it, it's a lot of organizations that are practically communist organizations, and we don't want to have anything to do with them. So that's kind of our thing is we're not looking to force everybody to go vegan. We're not looking to try to ban everything under the sun. We're trying to find kind of market-based approaches that can actually and if nothing else, give an ideological home to the kind of the libertarians and the conservatives that care deeply about animals and understand that this stuff is wrong and want to find new solutions to working forward on it.
Let's laser focus though on that objection, right? Like, what happens if we just tomorrow turn off factory farming, right? Like there's gonna be some obvious ramifications there, some maybe intended but also unintended consequences. What might that look like? And I guess what would be the answer from a more libertarian, conservative, I'm going to say more commonsensical approach to dealing with this? Like, what would that middle ground be? And then in transition, obviously, to a better solution, what might that look like?
Yeah, well, I do think, first of all, I think on the whole, it's eating less meat is a less expensive option. I know that you could talk about prices going up, but I think if you're saying eliminate factory farming tomorrow, I think that's probably that's not a way in which this would actually this would all come about. I think something that's more reasonable is looking at things like there's California passed a bill called Prop 12, which has kind of really basic standards for pigs, right? And for some other animals, but I think pigs are kind of the main forefront of it, where it's like pigs being able to have the room to stand up and turn around, right? Not being so confined that they can't even move. And the thing that's interesting about this bill and where it's caused, where it's created a lot of debate is that they're holding the meat that's coming into California to those same standards. So they will not have meat from coming from from states where that's how with those kinds of conditions that meet those kind of conditions. So we've obviously had this big pushback from the companies, and so this is actually something that went to the Supreme Court. Biden and Vilsack, who incidentally, Biden's head of ag was a big dairy lobbyist, which kind of gets into a lot of sort of how these things come about. But so they took this to the Supreme Court, and it was actually Gorsuch that basically said, the Constitution allows for a lot of things, but it doesn't give the federal government the power to dictate what kind of pork chops California eats. And I think that's a sort of basic tenet of federalism, right? So there's some of these ways where that kind of thing, where if a state makes that kind of decision, these companies may be mad about it. They may, but the state has the autonomy to do that. And it's also, so it doesn't necessarily have to be at the federal level, and the federal government shouldn't really have the authority to tell a different state, each state how they handle it. But also, one of the things that's kind of been a consequence of that, a sort of positive consequences, you've had a lot of farmers that have been, a lot of the smaller farmers have gotten adaptive and seen opportunities here where they can kind of specifically tailor their operations to meet those requirements, right? One is entrepreneurialism, right? It's seeing that need and meeting that need. The ironic thing about this is like these efforts to there's one for a long time, it's called the EATS Act, and in addition to the Supreme Court effort. Now that failed, they have another federal effort it has a mouthful of a name, but that's to do the same thing, to try to override this bill, try to give the federal government the power to, right? And the ironic thing about it is it's actually those small farmers they that have been adaptive have found a way to profit off of these bills would be punished because they're not in the way. If this bill went through, these guys wouldn't be able to reverse and go back to some other kind of conditions. But which is a difference between them and the larger these industrial meat producers who could make these changes very easily and compared to the smaller farmer. But they're just they don't want to do so, right? So it's so I think there's things like that where it's not necessarily like let's eliminate factory farming tomorrow, let's outlaw it tomorrow, but I think that there's ways that are, like you said, in kind of the world of common sense, where you make these changes, you do these things that actually improve these conditions and create some kind of possibility for us to both know what's going into our food, know that our tax dollars aren't being spent harming animals at that level.
And by the way, like going back to the actual individual farmers, right, or the individual butchers, like this is where Thomas Massie continues to be my favorite congressman, because he has been bringing forward the PRIME Act, right, the Process Revival and Intrastate Meat Exemption Act, which is a bipartisan legislative proposal, and it's entirely aimed at allowing the states greater autonomy over the sale of custom slaughtered meat within their borders. So going back to your point, more of a federalist approach. And this act, I think you've been bringing this up every year for the past like 5 years or so. I forget the representative, I think it's Representative Pingree, keep me honest here. I think they were just the most recent co-sponsor here in 2025, right? But the main provisions, just for folks who are playing along in the home game and they're not familiar, there's really three key provisions, right? So number one, exemption from federal inspection from livestock, such as beef, pork, and lamb. that are slaughtered and processed at custom facilities, provided the meat is also sold within that same state. Number two, expansion of current law, which only exempts custom slaughtered meat for personal, household, guest, or employee use, to also allow direct sale to consumers, restaurants, hotels, boarding houses, grocery stores, and other establishments. And then number three, states would gain the freedom to set their own standards for these sales and determine whether and how custom slaughtered meat can enter state commerce. So the arguments are, number one, strengthening local food infrastructure; two, increase access to local meat; and three, a reduction of burdens on small farmers and ranchers, right? Like this just seems like a common sense, no-brainer proposal. Liam, I mean, what the heck is holding us up here? Is it the bureaucracies? Is it the special interests? Is it a combination of all that and more? Tell us what's going on here.
Going to say all of the above. I think those are the biggest problems that you have people, Republican and Democrat Party that are kind of bought and paid for by powerful ones. I think you have I think the bureaucratic part of it is a hard thing too. One of the things actually, so Mike Lee is another big prime act of basically how Congress for years has been sort of abdicating their legislative authority over the executive branch. They'll say, we're passing a bill on clean water, and the EPA will decide what that means. My inclination to departments like the USDA, and who are run by industry people. You had a guest on the other day who just talked about the revolving door, which I know Trump talked about as he was running, that lobbyist bureaucrat revolving door. He's got held up, and how the sort of bureaucratic confines is. You have these executive branches that are writing this legislation. They'll call it regulations, they'll call it whatever they call it, but they're writing bills from the executive branch, and they're not really answerable. They're not answerable to us. They're not accountable to us as bureaucrats, and they're not really that accountable to the president or anybody else. They're just kind of making the law of the land elsewhere. But I can't speak to what's holding the bill itself up in Congress, other than probably special interests. But that kind of effort, I think, is exactly the type of thing where we can start peeling this stuff back, if we can push that kind of thing through.
Yeah, and by the way, like, this goes back to, listen, there's a lot of reasons I pick on Trump, and I think most of them, from my perspective at least, are well-deserved. But man, oh man, he did something great in being able to appoint a lot of these more conservative, right-leaning judges. And I look at what happened here in 2024 before the election. We got the ruling of Chevron deference, and they started to peel back the ability for these unelected bureaucrats. It was like legislatively, or not legislative, Supreme Court perspective, it was actually kind of a close ruling. It was 6-3. And the fact that Chevron deference, which brought this back to the lawmakers, right? Like, that's huge. And I guess, Liam, to piggyback on that, like, are we seeing any hope? Right? I'm a big believer in the hopium, so let's take it all day long here. Like, is there any hopium of looking at where we are today with things like Thomas Massey's Prime Act, Chevron deference being overruled back in 2024, and then I would just say a fundamental shift in culture with folks being more aware of the things they're putting in their body, the foods they're eating? Like, do we see that things are going to start pivoting towards a more common sense approach now, hopefully 2025 and beyond, to the way that we're actually allowing our producers to create these new ecosystems? Like, just tell us, where do you think things are headed? Does it feel like your office has quietly turned into a mini call center? I mean, you didn't plan for it, but between the customer service calls, the sales follow-ups, and team check-ins, the phones are ringing nonstop. And you're stuck managing it all with a setup built for 2012. And that's what I call the accidental contact center. And it's more common than you think. Level 365 makes it easy for you to level up. You'll get call routing, full call history, real analytics, without buying some massive contact center platform. It's plug-and-play simplicity for businesses that suddenly found themselves taking way more calls than expected. If that sounds like you should check out Level 365.
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of reasons to be optimistic. I think that, I actually co-authored an article with Patrick Brenner of Southwest Public Policy Institute, where we talked about the Chevron deference and kind of how that can kind of play the part of sort of a de facto Reins Act, and start to maybe reel back these what we call the jurisdictional fiefdoms that you're seeing throughout the executive branch. I think with that and the Prime Act and some of these things, I think there's reason to be optimistic. I think that when you look at the trajectory of people writ large, I think in America, I think there's kind of an appetite for noticing, regardless of party, noticing these sort of deep state entrenched things. It's interesting because I think at one point, for the longest time, we thought of the kind of the shorthand was like, oh well, the Republicans like big business and the Democrats like big government. But I think there's kind of a growing sense with the actual people separated from the politician, where it's like, no, those are the same things, and you both are propelled by both of them. And so I'm a terrible political prognosticator or predictor. I don't know that I can say how things are going to go, but I'm an optimistic person, and I think that there's reason to believe we can start peeling this stuff back.
Well, and man, elephant in the room, like it's time. It's finally time. It feels like that we're getting there, because I grew up in the 90s, right? I got to see the change myself firsthand. I know a lot of folks kind of grew up in this era where we watched as our food just became a big question mark. The environment, there's that meme of the I think it's the Spider-Mans, and they're all pointing at each other. And it's like, my dad full of lead, my grandpa full of asbestos, me full of microplastics. And it's just like, everybody is aware now that the shit we've been putting into our bodies, by and large, isn't good for us in some way, shape, or form. You can make the utilitarian arguments like, well, it's better than nothing. Like, I hear that. But if we're putting things in our bodies to our body's detriment from a health standpoint, that's just setting us up for years of pain, of misery, and by the way, opens the door, back to your point, of these big business types to say, oh my goodness, you have celiac disease. Oh, well, guess what? Here's a pill, right? And it's this never-ending cycle. And the fact that more and more folks are waking up to it, I think is a very much a big positive and a big step in the right direction. So, I mean, with all that being said, Liam, thank you for helping dig into this today. And by the way, folks are like, wait, Liam and Brian look different. It's because we had to hit pause and pick up part 2 of the conversation because we both had some computer issues. So I think we've rectified that. I'm going to blame the NSA because that's just the easy thing to do, right? The CIA, NSA, FBI. It was one of those 3-letter organizations.
Start talking about the deep state, you're going to have problems. Yeah,
that's what it was. That's right. The bureaucrats and the deep state, they came after us. But no, Liam, let's do this as we go towards the final part of our conversation. We like to do a little part called Final Thoughts, and usually I like to wrap the episode up in a nice, neat bow. But I mean, call to actions for folks, right? Like folks who are listening today, they're tired of factory farming. They're tired of putting crap in their bodies that they don't know what it is. I just saw this video go viral where this guy bought a steak from Publix and it's on the grill, and he goes to take it off, and like part of the steak is just like slime of some sort. And like people are tired of putting synthetic crap into their bodies. People just want real, natural, healthy solutions. So what would you say like is the best way for someone to take today's episode and have some type of call to action? What would that look like? And of course, if folks want to go ahead, continue the conversation with you, learn more about the Wilberforce Institute, floor is yours, Liam. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah. So what I can say is with at the Wilberforce, we're writing on a lot of this legislature, a lot of the legislature trying to push past without anyone noticing, and kind of highlighting a lot of these regulatory problems. So I so just go into our website. It sounds a little self-serving, but checking out our website, going to our Twitter, and reading some of the articles that we have. There's also if people sign up on our site, I think we're pushing out a newsletter. We have send a lot of articles. I know everyone's getting inundated by a ton of stuff, but we're not sending out too much. We're sending out just pertinent, good information. And some of the things that are coming is we're working on getting volunteers throughout the state, throughout every state. Hopefully, we can get a state person in every single state. to kind of lead some grassroots efforts and kind of get on the ground, especially where some of the state things too. There's there's some interesting technologies coming out, and that maybe everybody's not like cultivated meat, where it's new food technology that kind of creates an ethical answer for people that want to keep eating meat. It's not really there where it can be sold yet, or maybe isn't necessarily the best, the most accessible product now. But there's government bans going on at the state level, and why are we not allowing for this opportunity to exist? So I think there's things like that where we're going to try to do some more on the ground action. So if people sign up on our website, or even it's easy enough to email, shoot us a message, and would love to get as many people involved as want to be involved.
There you go. All right, folks. Well, listen, if you enjoyed today's conversation, please go ahead and give it a share. When you do, tag yours truly at B Nichols Liberty. You can find me on Facebook, X. I always want to say Twitter, X, and Instagram. And as for the program, you can go ahead and subscribe to it on your favorite podcasting platforms like Podcast Addict, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube Music, wherever it may be, or your favorite video platforms like YouTube, Rumble. And yes, we are uploading our shows on Twitter, X again, yes, and Facebook. And by the way, we live stream over on X and on Facebook every Monday, Thursday, and Friday evenings at 9 p.m. Eastern. You missed me back on Monday because I took the day off because I was down in South Carolina visiting family. So I'm sorry if you missed the show on Monday. Here you go. Here's your Thursday episode. And of course, we also air all of our Thursday episodes over on the Lions of Liberty Network. So proud to be part of the Pride. Again, you can go ahead and check out the Lions, the other Lions, John Odermatt, Brian McWilliams, and Lou Perez over at Lions of Liberty. With that being said, Liam, I'll give you the final words today. What do you want to leave the audience with?
Let's cut government and save animals.
There you go. Simple, easy, and to the point. I love it. And I love you, my audience. Thank you for joining us today. With that being said, Brian Nichols signing off here on The Brian Nichols Show for Liam Gray from the Wilberforce Institute. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to The Brian Nichols Show. Find more episodes at briannicholsshow.com.